We talked a bit about verbal communication, listening, active listening. Now it's time for us to talk about nonverbal communication. And it's not for you to use this skill to analyze other individuals, but it's more of an awareness channel for yourself and how you communicate with other individuals and how to try to understand your team. When you interact with your leaders and people within your organization. So all in the process of becoming a better leader is that you have to be able to distinguish what is heard and what is not spoken, what is seen through nonverbal communication. And as you just listened to this lecture on the ideas of surrounding nonverbal communication, I encourage you to think about your own body language, your own communication style non-verbally. I also encourage you to observe, be an observant participant of your team and how they are communicating with you. There's a lot of communication exchange that occurs within organizations that is unspoken. And how are you responding as a leader to those channels? How are you communicating with others when they are not using their vocal voice, when they are not using their spoken words? And even as I traveled the world and there is unspoken words just because of language barriers, people find ways to communicate. And the communication still simply goes all the way back to body language. And so, yes, we may use translation applications, but the truth is there is the body language, the need to express what they're trying to say. And in most cases, it's not really for harm when you're in an international setting. It's in an international business setting. It's not for harm. It's a way of trying to communicate verbally without being able to communicate. But through body language, you can feel and you can know excitement, interest. You can know your own temperament and you can gauge your behavior. First, let's talk about a few of the principles that was discussed. Mastery of oneself, owning your own self, knowing your own self, the way you communicate, the way you expect others to communicate. Really start analyzing yourself first. The first place of leadership, the first assessment begins with you before we take the assessment out to everyone else. The assessment belongs to you first as a leader to see where you are, how you behave, how you communicate, what's your style, who are you? Because you are the central focus point. You are the one that will be engaged with. And yes, your title or your reputation may precede you that you are standing on a pedestal somewhere, which is fine. But you have to take a step back and really analyze your own behaviors, your own messages, your own verbal ways and nonverbal ways of communicating. It's important, it's necessary that you master yourself. Next, observation, being an observer, really looking at situations and the circumstances for what it is, looking at the playing field, looking at the organization for what it is and not what it should be and not what it can be and what it needs to be. It's looking at where you are in that moment, in that space, with the people you have, with the team you have, with you look. And after you observe the verbal, you listen, then you observe the nonverbal, you see, and then you begin to analyze and break down the system that is necessary to pull your team towards a goal in a systematic way, in a way that can bring back returns upon returns upon returns sustainably. So observation is the next. The next was the idea of verbal and nonverbal communication, which we start to briefly touch on. How you communicate, your style, your method of communication. Taking action. Taking action is the next step. making a move. And so much of making the move, people get caught up in wanting to make the best move, wanting to make the best decision, wanting to be the perfect one. When in fact, it can just be a work in progress. Why can't we make decisions, act in the capacity that this is a work in progress, that this is not a perfect formula, that this is the trajectory that we're moving towards, and that the outcome, if we don't achieve it within this measured period of time, then we have to look at the situation in a different way and reanalyze our actions. The ability to act, yes, sometimes there is no room for processing information. Sometimes there's no room, there's no time in evident urgent situations. But as a leader, you have to take some time if there is an opportunity to take time to reflect. Critical reflection is needed for every leader. There is no exception. Reflection to act, and the actions, your actions affect other people's lives. Your decisions affect everyone's life. And as a leader, you have to be able to make the right actions and adjust the actions according to along the way. And it's not necessarily according to the plan. It's not according to the plan. It's according to the culture. It's according to the system that is in place. It's according to where everyone is, the measurement, the assessment of the team, and proceed in such a manner that fosters the appropriate actions. And so much systems and so many organizations I've seen are focused on, yes, we want some action, we need some change, we will reprimand, we will build consequences, we'll have rules, we'll establish a foundation in the most structured way possible, we will bring order. And just to quickly share a quick story, I remember I was brought into an organization to do some change management, and I was to lead this change management. And I was bringing in my formal teaching and practices from a larger organization, and I brought it to a smaller organization. And I wanted the change to happen because I knew what it should look like. I just knew the ideal standard, but it's almost in hindsight, I almost missed the fact that the culture wasn't there to support this growth, this new change. That the changes were necessary because it wasn't even optional changes. It was things that were needed to be done. But how do you bring the team to that vision? How do you get the team to perform in that space? And of course, we can go into the conversation now of how teams are formed and how teams are being built and forming and norming, performing, transforming. That we could go through the stages of team building. But essentially what I want to talk about is not only looking at the team aspect of how a team is formed and how a team is built, but looking at how the action should be taken. The mere action alone, the decision making of the decision maker. So we're looking at the action that change needs to happen, and how are we going to bring the team there? So now we have to backtrack and go back to understanding as the leader, understanding the position, communicating verbally, non-verbally, creating a culture around the change, building a system that supports growth and intuitive thinking and self-ownership type of behaviors to get to the goal so that the goal becomes sustainable and that the goal can keep moving forward. So as a leader, the responsibility that you have is not only in isolation of the action, but it's an assessment of all the situation, moving the situation forward and moving the situation to a place where people want to perform. Now, of course, there are different types of leadership methods, which we're not going to get into either, which is, is there a transactional leader? Is there a transformational leader? Is a leader that's inspiring you, or is it a leader that drives you through motivational and incentive types of behaviors? So this is not a discussion about transformational leadership, or is it about transactional leadership, but it's more a discussion of how is your leadership encouraging action? What are your own actions? And how are these actions defined? And the movement of these actions that affects everyone's life. So moving the pieces of the puzzle forward, you notice that your actions, your behaviors, your understanding of the situation is what's going to move things forward. By creating a divide, by showing that you're in it with the team. I mean, those are all leadership methodologies, different ways of approaching leadership. But making the decision, going with the decision, evolving the decision, admitting that you're wrong, admitting that there should be an adjustment, or admitting that it's not necessary that you're right, but allowing there to be room for transformation within the system, of showing a system that, every day is a work in progress. Every day is an opportunity for something new, for you to be innovative, for you to bring and shine your own newness to the situation, and creating that culture that will bring about that type of attitude. And last but not least is comfort. The idea of creating a comfortable environment for individuals to behave and perform in, for you as a leader to act in a way that you are comfortable, that others are comfortable coming to you, that you are approachable and you are friendly, or have the demeanor of being open and honest. And sometimes, you have that open and honest type of attitude, and you may not like to hear the things that may be said to you. And then sometimes the boundaries that are created are kind of blurred, right? So there may be a boss dynamic. There's a distance there. But then when you create this comfort level, sometimes the boundaries can be crossed. But allowing there to be that room for redirection as the leader, for you to help the team show that, yes, there is a level of comfort, there is a level of understanding. And when work needs to get done, work can be done. And when we all need to just be human and be human, let's create that culture where we can relax together. But then when it's time to get back on the ball, that we can do it. When there's time for us to get back on focus, on track, then we can do it. And so understanding these boundaries is also something you'll have to create. But creating huge distances between one employee to the next, one executive to the next, to an employee that is further down the chain of command, there is no room there to bring about change, discussion, openness, change, newness, ownership. Establishing comfort brings the opportunity to further the discussion, and for us to further build an understanding of the verbal and nonverbals that continuously shape our environment and will continue to transform the leadership that we intend to carry out in the future.